Welcome back, travelers, to the Planeswalker's Tome, your portal to the realms of Magic the Gathering. Whether you're joining us on YouTube or through our podcast, we're thrilled to have you along for the journey. Now, let us resume our exploration of The Eternal Ice by Jeff Grubb. Chapter 17, Ice Caldron. The Battle of Kejodor rang down the curtain on the Ice Age with resounding thunder. The greatest enemy of the last part of that age, the necromancer of Trestlehorn, was defeated, though at a great cost to those who opposed him. It was a battle worthy of the ancients, of great stories and legends. But this was the time of ice, when powers much greater than the mere mortals walked the land, and as such, it was the actions of one planeswalker which would dim the achievements of an entire human nation, and change the world more fundamentally than any battle. Though those who pulled themselves from the wreckage of the battlefield did not know it, their world was about to end, and for reasons they knew nothing about. Argoth, Argivian scholar. Yaya found Jodah near the smoking remains of Limdul's pyramid an hour later. The snow had tapered off, and the surviving flakes were mixed with smoke rising from myriad corpse pyres. All the dead, regardless of origin, were being burned by the victors. Jodah remained near the spot where he had fought Limdul, kneeling head down, his fists clenched to his sides. Yaya was herself covered with soot. The search for some type of equalizer had proven fruitless, and for her trouble she and a group of Kejodorn survivors were ambushed by a squad of reanimated zombies. Their assailants fell apart with the rest of the undead all at once, as Limdul's power was broken. Yaya assumed the collapse of the undead was because Jodah had won the battle with Limdul, but now, upon seeing Jodah, she was not sure. She next down to him, unsure what to say. "Jodah," she nudged him. "Are you all right?" Jodah shook his head and looked up. His jaw was clenched in anger, and his features were twisted in a storm cloud. I had him beat, and I lost him." "Lost who? Limdul?" questioned Yaya. "We fought. I had him empty. Spell lost. And then..." Jodah's voice faltered, and he shook his head in disgust. "He escaped," he said at last, poison in his voice. Yaya looked around suddenly, as if expecting the necromancer to appear at any moment. "Escape," she said, and air going out of her as well. She shook her head and straightened her shoulders. "Then we have to go to Trestlehorn. Now, while he's still weak. We can use your safe havens to reach that cavern overlooking the keep. Take whatever mages we have and go there." But Jodah was shaking his head angrily. "No, you don't understand. Leshrac was here, at the battle. He took Limdul with him, and I had him beaten." "Leshrac rescued him?" Yaya shook her head. "Where did they go? Did they say?" Jodah waved his hand at the gathering smoke clouds. "Away, to another universe, to that rogue plane that I discovered. They will not be back." Yaya blinked at Jodah. "So they're gone? Forever." Jodah spat. "Forever. And I had him." Yaya stood up angrily. "Let me understand this. Limdul is gone. The necromancer has been swept away by his demonic patron. He's not coming back." Jodah nodded slowly. Yaya exploded. "And you're upset because you weren't the one to put him away? Unbelievable!" Jodah stood up slowly. "If I had had one more spell, one more trick, if only I kept the mirror, then maybe." "Hold on, archmage," snapped Yaya. "This just came in on a carrier pigeon. Limdul has been defeated. Kejodor has been saved. Everybody you know and care about won't be turned into zombies. Set down your ego someplace comfortable and chew on that for a while." Jodah took a deep sigh and shook his head. "I know. You have to understand. Gods below. You should have been a planeswalker," shouted Yaya, pinwheeling her arms wide. "Your ego is almost as large as theirs. Thanks to you, Limdul is gone. And all you can think of is the fact that it wasn't your boot print on his backside." Jodah raised his hands. "Fine. You've made your point. But no," she continued, louder still. "You had to be the monster killer, the great warrior. It's not like everyone else didn't have something to do with this." "Enough," said Jodah, but he had a small smile on his face. Yaya stopped in mid-declamation and raised her eyebrows at the archmage, waiting for him to say something else. Jodah smiled, his smile evaporating, and said, "The others, how are they?" "I'm fine. Thanks for asking," said Yaya, putting her hands in her pockets and grimacing. "Losses were pretty bad all around. Most of the mages were toasted, both freelance and academy. We haven't found Gustla yet, and to be frank, it doesn't look good. Varchal took a wound to the face that'll leave a nasty scar, but she'll live. Lavisa Cold Eye's hide was too thick to even scratch. She's willing to give you a tub of meat for destroying Limdul, so you don't have to tell her the truth of the matter. And there's already squabbling between Kejodorians and Bluvians about splitting up the looted spoils of the dead." Jodah pinched the bridge of his nose with his fingers. "Can't these people realize that they've just won a great battle?" "My point exactly," said Yaya. "Anyway, Varchild and Cold Eyes are being their adorable selves, which means that either the barbarians are going to hee back to their own turf with enough loot to make themselves happy, or there's going to be a second battle here with the results of the first. Probably the former is my guess. Varchel doesn't have the force to press the issue. Probably, said Jodah, letting the air of his lungs. His chest still hurt, and he wondered if any of his ribs had came loose. There will be no second battle. Everyone is too tired. Everyone has lost too much. Still, the results of this battle should stand as a hallmark for cooperation between the kingdom and the tribes. If you say so, Nadjaya. For myself, I'll wait to see what happens. The pair looked out over the debris of the battlefield. Snow flurries continued on and off, and small flakes clung to the churned soil and the fallen warriors on both sides. Smoke from a dozen pyres supported an overcast vault of dark clouds. It looks like hell, said Jodah. But you've seen worse, suggested Yaya. Jodah nodded slowly. That doesn't make it any easier. Yaya leaned against the archmage. Yeah, but knowing that it still bothers you after all these centuries means there's hope for you yet. Jodah looked skyward and said idly, Only if the clouds would break, we could stand some sun. Who needs the sun when you got me around? Said Yaya brightly. A warm wind kicked up across the battlefield, scattering the hard pelt like snow before it. The warmth should have made Jodah feel better, but instead a familiar warning tickled at the base of his spine, and the hair of his neck stood on end. Jaya felt it as well. Oh no, she muttered. Please no, not now, not after everything else. The warm world swirled around them and formed a veritable circle. The circle thickened until it resembled a pond that had been laid on its side, 10 feet across. In the center of the vertical pond, filling its entire radius, appeared the face of Freyles. All is ready, said the multi-octave voice of the planeswalker. You may come if you choose to. As I promised, I will not force you. Jodah frowned, his shoulders sagging. It has been a long day, planeswalker. I do not care what your plans are. We are done. The huge face smiled. My plans are to change the world. My plans are to end this age of ice. I thought you might be interested. Jodah and Yaya looked at each other surprised. Yaya spoke first. You think? I think you'd better find out what she's up to now, replied Jodah. If it's not one planeswalker, it's another, muttered Yaya. With that, the pair stepped into the portal, into Freyles' domain. It was warmer on the far side of the portal, and wetter as well. Jodah knew immediately they were further south. Pines dripping with rain flanked them on all sides, and the air smelled of cedar. There was the lilting sound of elven voices. On the refrain, they were joined by more bass tones. Humans! Finhorn, said Yaya. Jodah nodded. At the base of their minds, a multi-octave voice spoken. Follow the voices, it says. We have begun. Jodah winced at the mental touch. That's unpleasant, he muttered. Yaya grimaced. It doesn't get any better with time. The sand path wound up a hillside, doubling back on itself time and again, finally scaling the top. Despite the calming sounds of the elven voices, Jodah and Yaya felt their muscles complain. They'd been through too much already. Jodah expected to arrive at the top of a ridge. Actually, they'd reached the edge of a crater, long since worn away by time into a great bowl. The interior of the bowl was treeless and covered with short velvet grass, wet from the recent rains. Arrayed on the grass was a kneeling multitude of elves and men. The elves were slender of face and delicate of body, but men and women were hardier, from nearby towns such as Kalinsko, alongside druids and protectors of the forest. All were dressed in white robes with green trim. Yaya pointed a chin towards a grey-based figure at the far side of the crater, flanked by the thin wisp of a girl. Old Kolbjorn, she said. Elder druid who I got the trinket from. The one who got us into this mess. Don't know who the girl is. Maybe his heir? Jodah just nodded. The ancient man was standing, his arms outstretched, intoning the chorus of the chant with the rest of the humans. They paid no attention to Jodah and Yaya, for they were enraptured by their holy mass. These were the people who worshipped Freyles as a goddess. Goddess, she seemed, for that moment, hovering over the assemblage at the center of the bowl-shaped veil. She was dressed as Yaya and Jodah had seen her on the day before, on the eve of the battle, but she seemed even larger now, more resplendent. Her armor shone with the wet radiance, and her face seemed to glow with a beatific illumination. She seemed all-wise and all-powerful, as she floated above the assembled humans and elves, her arms outstretched to embrace them. Every mouth was opened in song, and it seemed every heart as well. 3 separate melodies ran through the chorus, each crossing and recrossing itself in an intricate pattern. As they sang, Freyles seemed to glow even brighter, as if her radiance was tied to their volume. Nice show, muttered Yaya. When do they send out the jesters and dancing bears? Shush, said Jodah. What's that beneath her? At the bottom part of the crater, directly beneath the Freyles' floating form, was a huge metallic bowl, a cauldron of frosted iron. Rime formed around the outside of the cauldron, despite the warmth of the surroundings. From their viewpoint high on the hill, Jodah could see that the interior of the cauldron was inscribed with runes, spiraling into the center of the pot. At the bottom of the cauldron was a familiar flicker, and Jodah knew that it was his mirror, at the center of the ritual. The sight of the spiraling runes tickled the back of his brain, though of legends at that Nam from before his arrival. They were not pleasant legends. Jodah turned to Yaya. I think we should move closer. Yaya winced. I can't. Can you? Jodah tried to step forward, but found that he could not. It was not an uncomfortable feeling, merely the refusal of his muscles to act as commanded. He tried to back away, but found that nothing responded. He could still turn his head around and raise and lower his arms, but his legs were mired. Both he and Yaya were trapped like insects in sap. Beside him, Yaya cursed. Jodah said, Freyalise, in a calm tone. In the back of his mind, he shouted, Freyalise! The pressure returned, soft, warm, and comforting. The singers are placed with utmost care, responded Planeswalker. Each voice is set in perfect pitch with its neighbors, and set the focus on me and the ice cauldron beneath me. At the center of this song, Freyalise's impassive form glowed stronger. I cannot let you disrupt the careful web of our work. Yaya cursed again. Jodah said, thought. Then why did you bring us here? To show you what I have been doing to help your world, came response. What I have been doing while you wanted me to help you with such minor matters as kingdom and invasions. To show you why my people regard me as a goddess. To brag, said Yaya aloud. But Freyalise ignored the comment. I brought you here to understand, and I brought you here to ask for help, said Freyalise, directly into Jodah's mind. You have my mirror, said Jodah, as he noticed the voice change and tempo begin to increase. The help is freely asked, and should be freely given, said Freyalise. I will not bargain. It will be your choice. Understood, growled Jodah. You said you were going to put an end to the ice. What folly are you pursuing? No folly at all, replied Planeswalker. After my first encounter with your friend, the task mage, I found myself curious about your research for Leshrac, particularly the idea of a rogue plane intersecting with the shatter of our own universe. Leshrac thought he could use the rogue plane to escape our imprisoned universe. He is gone, said Jodah. He already left for the rogue plane. He is a fool, replied Freyalise, a mad fool. He thought only of abandoning or escaping. I am thinking of rejoining and restoring. I thank you again for your aid in allowing me access to your archives. It was most helpful, though there were things there that only one such as I could comprehend. And modest too, said Yaya. Jodah wondered if it was wise to taunt a planeswalker when one could not run away. The present world was birthed in Argoth during the Brothers' War. To end their battle, Urza used a still more ancient device to defeat his brother, a device known as the Golgothian Cyclics. The Cyclics, thought Jodah, and he remembered his own research, coming across references to the device in Drafna's writings. The memories were quickly swallowed by the glowing Freyalise thing. Exactly. In addition to destroying his brother, and his brother's armies, and his own armies, Urza's actions also sank most of Argoth and destroyed the world's weather. An ice age descended upon us. I was there for that part, thought Jodah. Yes, but what you could not know was that when Urza set off his device, he broke off a small gathering of planes from the rest of the multiverse. A small shard, no more than a dozen planes. But they were sealed off from the rest of reality as assuredly as the ice held this globe in its grip. The shard has been a prison to planeswalkers ever since. A large prison, but a prison nonetheless. How does this affect the Ice Age, said Jodah. Your rogue plane, said Freyalise, as the music changed again, becoming more passionate and still more involved. It's not of the shard, and is carrying great energy with it, setting up waves like a boat through our water. Properly harnessed, these waves could bring us back to the rest of infinity. But, continued the Planeswalker, that requires a force almost as large as the one that Urza himself unleashed on the world. In this case, however, it would be a healing force, a restorative force, to break the grip of the ice and bring Tezier back to its true state. You're mad, said Jodah quietly aloud. So I have duplicated Urza's golden bowl, said Freyalise, and I place your mirror at its heart. I want the land to see its true form and return to that form, much as you always return to your true form by using the mirror. As mad as Leshrac, said Jodah, shaking his head. In many ways you're worse. Jodah, what is it? Said Freyalise. If she wishes to work Urza's spell, she will unleash incredible energy, said Jodah sharply. The blast will break the ice, yes, but it will also break the continent itself. The nations will fall, and there will be a new dark age. There will be another 2,000 years before anything recovers. The Freyalise thought curled in on itself, like a contented cat. So you do understand the magnitude of this project. Good. Jodah felt himself shouting, Freyalise, If you do this, the result of the explosion will destroy Fenhorn itself, much as it destroyed Argoth all those years ago. All your followers will perish. They know, said Frey simply. What greater honor is there to die on behalf of your god? You speak truly, though. It will be a new devastation. While it will hear the shard, it will wipe out most of the people in eastern Tezier. Unless, Jodah's stomach sank, unless there is the venting of the explosion through the land. To multiple sites at once, said Freyles. Jodah shook his head. What was Freyles saying? Like the Soldevri bowler golems? If there's only enough safety valves, there would be no explosion. Or that the explosion would be lessened by going in so many directions. And what did you have to do with him? Worn and drained of his spells. Yaya reached up and grabbed his shoulder. He turned to her and said, The safe havens. She wants your safe havens. The Freyles slot beamed at the base of the brain as the planeswalker's body now glowed with the opalescent radiance of a true god. She is right, bright girl. Your magical doorways open across the land. The SX energies would be shunted safely away. The spell would still work. The shard would be healed. But in this case, the world would survive as well. Jodah felt an anger build within him, a gathering storm of his own. You know how to use the safe havens, he said sharply. You don't need me for this mad plan. But you know them more intimately, replied Freyles. Above them, the sky was beginning to swirl, the clouds spiraling around the crater, away from its center and the planeswalker. You know them well enough to use them as such, even though using them for the spell will break them forever. You are mad, he was nearly shouting. That is why I asked for your aid, not demand it, said Freyles. With the shard healed, I will be gone from here. It matters little to me whether you or your world survive the experience or not. Does the hatchling truly worry about the fate of its eggshell? I said I would ask freely for your aid, and now I do so. You don't know what you're asking, he said sharply. I know what will happen if you choose not to aid, said Freyles. Her body was a glowing star now. Jodah looked at Yaya. Her mouth was a thin line. For once she had no advice, but her eyes held fear for what was to come. The singing in the crater built to a crescendo, and the worshippers were straining their throats raw to keep up with the chants. Freyles was only a humanoid-shaped pulse of light now. I will help, Jodah said at last, but only if, after this is all done, you sit still long enough for me to tell you why you've done a horrible thing. Fair enough, said Freyles. Visualize taking my hand. Jodah did so, and he was plunged into the heart of the maelstrom. At first it threatened to overwhelm him, to swallow him whole and drag him away. He was lost in the ocean, far away from any shore, and the tides pulled at him. Then he realized that the ocean was Freyles, and that he was within her consciousness. It buoyed him, and absorbed him, and swept him along. He could hear singing from over the horizon, and it was not sharp, strained, or discordant. It flowed sweetly and sharply. It was infinite in its chorus. It was the music of the plains. Freyles was around him and within him. He fought the urge to drown and let himself dissipate into this greater form, this greater intellect. He fought to remember who he was through all of his lives, and found at his heart a strong place to stand. The ocean of thought that was Freyles seemed to approve. Look round, said something within his heart. Jodah looked, and saw the universe as Freyles saw it, as the planeswalker saw it. Worlds spun and danced, each belonging to one universe, yet separated from each other by walls of the reality. Some of the planes were natural, Jodah noticed, while others felt artificial, like works of art or great mechanical things. They were huge, they were infinite, they were tiny compared to the greater whole, a whole that they were cut off from by a wall of ebony ice, a black glacier that touched one side of the infinity of Freyles' mind. Now Jodah could hear more voices, not only those of Freyles' worshippers, but of everything. Life seemed to sing on each of the planes, even the most crudely formed. He thought of the lives around him like firefly sparks, pretty, or entrancing, and all too temporary. A few great intellects shone like brief stars, bursting and then fleeing to black. There were other presences in the abyss, darkness that moved along the plains. These were other planeswalker, kept from Freyles' ocean of thought. Most seemed malevolent and brooding. The thoughts of planeswalker made Jodah think of Leshrac, and from that his thoughts skittered sideways to the rogue plane. Now he saw it. A small pinpoint sailed among the dozen universes, kicking up a wake as it passed through the related realities. The wake grew into a wave, and the wave began to grow greater still, until it towered over him within Freyles' mind. Now, said the voice that was all around him, and within him, open the gates. The true and dangerous part of the spell begins. The ocean of thought seemed to catch fire around him, flames spreading in all directions, the water boiling off into continent-sized gouts of steam. The pressure increased, and Jodah felt as though it would crush him, tightening on all sides. Jodah reached out and, using the skill taught to him by a younger man, opened the safe havens. This time, however, he opened all of them at once, allowing the energy to flow through the entire web of connections. And as fire, the energies burned the web as they flowed through it. Jodah felt as if the entire world was passing through his form, that he was the mirror that now reflected the universe. The pressure increased again, and it may have been that he screamed, or it may have been Freyles who screamed, or the world itself. Elsewhere, on Tezier, the world rocked at its foundations. In Kajaldor, a small cavern in the hills outside Grubb, suddenly spewed flame, melting the snow drifts for 5 miles around and setting hamlets, abandoned earlier by the threat of the necromancer, ablaze. In the northern lands of the barbarians, magma erupted from a similar blind cave, spewing out over the valley and broiling hordes of wild aurochs as they grazed. In the wastelands of Adakar, the wind-smoothed landscape trembled as deep pockets of gas pushed to the surface, igniting as they erupted and creating new plains of glass. Beyond the sea, the bubble of air within a coral reef exploded, destroying a merfolk encampment nearby. A water geyser appeared in an area previously abandoned by all as desert. The nomads of that land celebrated until they found the water tasted of tears and burned their throats. In Yavimaya, there was an explosion of flowers previously unseen in the land. As petals fell through the forest, something ancient stirred in the heart of the woods, answering the call of the troubled plain. In Latnam, an entire cliffside fell away, and the ice-bound island was rocked to its foundation by earthquakes. Gerda Egg's daughter prayed to a litany of gods, and then to planeswalkers, and finally to Jodah himself, but none answered their pleas. Within the glaciers there were fireballs that burned ice, spreading outward in mile-wide caverns before the steam turned to water and sloshed back, extinguishing the explosion's heart. Yet the water did not freeze again, and the ice at the borders began to cave and fall into new lakes, spreading them across the north. The mountain overlooking Tresorhorn exploded, sending shards of ice and rock downwards in an avalanche. Cheska, keeper of Tresorhorn, had time to bellow one more curse before the mass slammed into the keep. Throughout Tezier, the myriad safe havens gave way under pressure of the energies Freyles unleashed. One after another, Jodah felt the electric shock of the havens burning out, consumed by their own fury. For each one that died, Jodah felt sadness and regret, and his sense of indignation and anger began to grow as well. That sense of rage was wiped out when the Freyles thing within him said, "Look up," and Jodah looked up at the black glacier that was balance of the planeswalker reality. It was no longer a boundary. The wall had melted to reveal an even greater reality beyond. The universes of the shell were paltry things compared to the greater entities beyond. They shone like fireworks and thundered like a million choruses. And they all made sense. Rising into that greater glory were the brooding entities he had felt before, the other planeswalkers. They rose like bubbles in the sea, and like the sun on a clear morning. They rose and joined with the greater reality until they themselves were lost among its wonders. Jodah was crying for the beauty. At least he thought he was crying. The Freyles thing comforted him and calmed him, and slowly returned him to the reality that he knew. The limited temporal physics of those who were not planeswalkers. "So," said Freyles at last, "you wanted to say something? I will listen now, before I leave." This concludes Chapter 17 of our saga. If you enjoyed the tale so far, don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow us on both YouTube and your favorite podcast platform. Your support means the world to us. Until next time, may your adventures be as boundless as the plains themselves. Thanks for listening.